been a landmark legal ruling that signage is unlawful. This was quite interesting. A scaffolder called Noel Wilcox, who's been hit with £11,500 in penalties, won a ruling that key signs for a sister scheme are not lawful. He believes this win paves the way for others to fight charges when Khan's Ulez expands to cover the whole of Greater London. That's starting tomorrow. There's also a denial from Sadiq Khan that he is going to have a pay-per-mile road scheme within London, and he's been criticised for claiming that that is not on his agenda, despite appearing in his own transport strategy as a proposal for consideration. So it is factually on the agenda. Well, someone who has an interesting perspective on this is Dr. Laura Jane Smith, who is a consultant respiratory specialist doctor in South London. Dr. Smith, Laura Jane, if I may, you're very welcome to Talk TV this afternoon. How are you doing?
Hi, thanks. Good to be here.
Tell me what you think of Ulez as a policy.
Ulez is great news for everyone across London. We've been waiting for far too long for real action on air pollution. Air pollution is a public health crisis, and the government's been sitting on its hands for a decade or more. And so this is just the latest in a number of steps that we need to take so that everyone across this country, across the whole of the UK, can breathe clean air, and we can stop robbing people of their health and their lives, which is what we're currently accepting as normal.
How many times has dirty air, or a version of it, whatever the technical medical term is, how often has that been on a death certificate in London in the last 5 years?
So death certification is complex. So as you'll be well aware, the first person to have air pollution put on their death certificate was 9-year-old Ella Deborah. That was 10 years ago now that she lost her life conclusively from air pollution. She lived on the South Circular. She walked to school every day in Lewisham, and she died after spending multiple times in hospital, multiple admissions. She's the first person to have air pollution on her death certificate as an individual, because it's difficult in many cases to be clear about a single person's death and the exact contribution.
I'm sure
that's the case for all things, all exposures.
I'm sure we
like
have great. I mean, everybody listening will have great sympathy for the Deborah family and all that they have gone through. How many people since then have had air pollution on their death certificate?
I'm not aware of anyone else who's had that.
So no one in the last 10 years, no one? Not
that I'm aware of, but can I finish my sentence? So normally we wouldn't have the extensive work that went into looking into the exact cause of Ella's death, and that was because there was an additional coroner's inquiry that her mum has campaigned for years. So in most cases, just like with smoking, we know that smoking kills people all the time. It kills 1 in 2 of regular users of cigarettes, but we don't know in an individual case whether someone's heart attack was directly caused that day by the cigarette they had. It's the same with air pollution. We know the data's there, we know the exposure, we see the deaths and the illness, but we can't pin it down to a single case, and so that's why it doesn't appear on death certificates.
You're someone who has had a heck of a lot of medical training, and I'm not going to argue with you on medical points, but what I think a lot of people, I've covered this issue many times on this station, and what many people feel in London and other parts of the country as well is that motorists are being targeted, that they're being charged money to leave their driveways. There are people who are on the breadline in a cost of living crisis, and this is an extra charge which doesn't actually take vehicles off the road. It merely charges them for going onto the road. It's discouraging them, of course, but when you look at places such as the Tube in London, that is far more polluted. In fact, there are many parts of the Tube where emissions cannot even escape because they're far too low down. They're below the surface. And there are also many situations where cars are much more efficient and much more environmentally friendly than they were, for example, 10 years ago when Ella Deborah died. So a lot of people will say this is just a money-grabbing exercise from Sadiq Khan, and they're unhappy about it. What would you say to those people, Laura Jane?
I would say it's really tough. I really understand that people have major concerns because they have low incomes. What I would say is that we can't pit health against our finances. That's what
but that is happening.
People are doing.
With respect, that is what is happening. People are saying that actually, look, the health there are many, many health problems that people have. This is just perhaps one of them. There are many people who are quite sceptical about this, and they're saying that we can't pit this against this. But at the same time, they're saying, look, I don't have £12.50 a day. I don't, if I'm on a night shift, for example. I'm sure there are nurses in your hospital, for example, who are on the night shift, and they may be charged £12.50 one day for the start of the shift, another £12.50 the next of the day. That goes into that's £25 off a shift that they're doing in the NHS. There are a lot of people very heavily impacted by this.
Yes, absolutely. What I would say is that we're only talking about the most polluting vehicles. So yes, there are a small number of people who will struggle with this because their cars are not compliant. That's not most people. In the best data we have available, 9 out of 10 cars on an average day were already Ulez compliant, those driving around outer London. So this is a small number of people. There is the scrappage scheme exactly for that reason. And to their credit, the Mayor's office has listened to Londoners who were saying that this needed to be extended and has extended the scrappage scheme. Now, some people will say that it's not enough, and I wouldn't argue with that.
You can't buy a good car for £3,000, a new car for £3,000. You certainly can't buy an electric car for £3,000.
No, absolutely. What we really need is to think about our cities and how we move around them. Many people using their cars are using them for short journeys. So 14% of London car journeys are under a kilometre. I also do long shifts, do 12-hour shifts, and I cycle home because I'm lucky enough to live in an area of London that has good cycling infrastructure that's improved significantly in the last 10 years. So we do need to think about switching to other alternative forms of transport that are going to be better for our health, both on an individual basis by being more active and on a community basis.
There are many people...
The scrappage scheme is one part of that, but there are other parts too. Investing in public transport is also essential.
You talk about investing in public transport. London, I think we are spoiled and we have amazing public transport. Sitting here in London, I live in London, but there are many people right across the UK where this scheme may be extended that simply do not have nearly as good public transport. There are many disabled people I know who watch and listen to these programmes who think, well, I would find it very difficult to get on a bus, to get to a bus stop, for example, and my car is the freedom that I have. And it's those people as well who will suffer from this scheme.
So there are mitigations for example, for small businesses and, for example, for disabled people. So they are not included necessarily. There are special provisions made for them within the scheme. And there's no suggestion that this is going to be a countrywide issue. The peaks of air pollution are within our cities. So that's why other cities across the UK and across the world are looking at clean air zones. And that's because they work. The data shows that they reduce exposure. They do change people's behaviour over time. That does take a while because people have to adapt to the way that we move.
But there will be
that's what we need for a good future.
There will be people who will be sceptical about the science behind this, and I wonder if you could perhaps make this clear, because Sadiq Khan, there is absolutely no doubt about this, that he has been asking scientists to change their wording at the very least in terms of some of the science that has come through this. There is modelling that has suggested that 4,000 people have die a year because of this. That doesn't have scientific basis. It is not peer reviewed. And actually someone like yourself, Dr. Smith, who is a consultant respiratory specialist, I would place a heck of a lot more trust in than a lot of the information that's been put out by the Mayor's office.
So let me reassure you and everyone that there's absolutely no doubt at all about the devastating impacts of air pollution. There are papers coming out all the time, not including peer-reviewed papers, including those internationally, people with absolutely no perceived or real vested interest in this issue. I got interested in air pollution because I'm a lung doctor and I was seeing people in my clinic who were really struggling to breathe. It's terrifying not being able to breathe. And I've also got friends who are just worried about their children, having dragged them to A&E again and again. And I started reading up on this issue with an interest in lungs. What I found was that the data out there is much worse than I thought. Because of the air pollution being invisible, we don't realise what an impact it's having.
But it must be frustrating for someone like, sorry to interrupt you, and this is my final question. It must be frustrating for someone like you, a consultant respiratory specialist, someone who has spent many hours, many years learning and getting the skills and the qualifications to become the position that you're in today. And I'm sure you do a very good job, Laura Jane. But Sadiq Khan has been putting out information that is not peer reviewed and that is not factual, and people are frustrated by that. That must be frustrating for you as well.
So I can't comment on individual papers or reports because I'm not cited on what you're referring to. But of course it's frustrating when these sort of issues, which are pretty black and white to me, you know, we have a public health crisis, we need to act. when these things get politicised, I think that's such a shame, because actually many of the people who are currently worrying about the cost, and therefore that's top of their mind, understandably, they're the very people who'll benefit the most, because people who have the lowest incomes are most likely to live in the areas that are most polluted. And in the end, this problem could all be fixed tomorrow if central government release some funds. They've got money to find whenever it suits them, for example, to extend the MP severance pay. Why haven't they got money to invest in public transport, to increase the scrappage scheme, so that everybody can just get on with what we all want to do, which is getting clean air?
Well, increasing the MPs' money when they stop being MPs would cost about £4,000, £4 million if every single one of them resigned at the next election. That wouldn't barely touch the sides in terms of the investment that's needed in public transport.
But my point is, this is about priorities, and the government has made its priorities clear, and it's not the health of working people and low-income people.
I mean, they committed to net zero. That was a commitment that the Conservative government made, for example. You think the Conservative government doesn't care about poor people's health?
I mean, it's great to make a commitment. What I'd like to see is more action. Where is our investment in clean public health, public transport?
Okay, thanks very much indeed. That's Dr. Laura Jane Smith, a consultant respiratory specialist doctor.